Gary Neville spent all season waiting for Zubimendi to take over a game. He's still waiting, and honestly, so am I. That's the thing that's been sitting with me since Saturday. Not the result. Arsenal won. 3 points, job done. But I watched that game against Newcastle, and something just didn't feel right. And then Neville came out and said it out loud on his own podcast. And the way he said it, it wasn't even anger. It was disappointment. And disappointment is always worse than criticism. He said he expected Zubimendi to be the player, the difference maker, the one who steps into these moments in a title race and makes everything look calm. And instead, Newcastle had more possession than Arsenal, more shots than Arsenal. And the one player who's supposed to stop that from happening, the one we paid £55.8 million for, couldn't impose himself. Now look, before we go any further, I want to be honest about something, because I think a lot of content around this is going too far in one direction or the other. Either people are completely destroying Zubimendi or they're defending him like he's untouchable. And I don't think either of those takes is actually interesting. What I think is interesting, what I genuinely cannot stop thinking about, is the gap. The gap between what we thought we were signing and what we actually have, and whether that gap can close in the next 5 Premier League games and a Champions League semi-final. Because if it can, Arsenal win the title, and Neville is wrong. And if it can't, then we might be looking at the exact reason why a 21-year wait continues. So let's actually go there properly. I'm Amelia, welcome back to the channel. If you've been watching Arsenal this season and something in midfield has been bothering you, but you couldn't quite name it, drop a comment below, because I think a lot of us have felt it. And today, I want to try and actually explain it. Right, so let's start here. Zubimendi is not having a bad season. I need to say that clearly before anything else. Because if you just look at the raw facts, 33 league starts, more than any other outfield player in this Arsenal squad. And his total minutes, almost identical to Declan Rice. The two of them are basically running side by side on the minute tracker. And Rice has been one of the best players in the Premier League this season. So Arteta trusts him completely. The selection record proves that. You don't give a player 33 starts in a title race if you don't believe in him. Arteta is not a sentimental manager. He does not play players out of loyalty or habit. So that trust is meaningful. But here's where I need to push back on the comfort of those numbers. Because I think there's a very important distinction that we're not making enough. And it's this: reliability is not the same as impact. Being available every week, being fit, being technically correct, staying in position, those are all genuinely good things. But in a title race, in the games that actually decide whether you win a league or not, good isn't enough. You need players who change the game, who impose themselves, who make the difference. And when I watch Zubimendi, I see a reliable midfielder, a technically sound midfielder, but I'm not sure I see a decisive one, and that's the problem. Now, Gary Neville made a comparison, and I want to sit with this for a second, because I think the comparison itself tells us everything about what Arsenal were trying to buy. He mentioned Pirlo, Scholes, Rodri, Bernardo Silva. Those aren't just good midfielders. Those are players who completely changed the identity of their teams. When Pirlo was at his peak at Juventus, the whole team moved through him. Everything slowed down when it needed to slow down, and accelerated when it needed to accelerate. He was like a conductor. Same with Scholes at United in those later years. The game just organized itself around him. And Rodri. Look, Rodri is a once-in-a-generation player. I actually think comparing anyone to Rodri is slightly unfair, but I don't think that's entirely what Neville was doing. I think what he was saying, and this is what I keep coming back to, is that this is the function Arsenal were trying to buy. Not Rodri as a person, but that role, that authority. Someone who makes a team feel in control, even when the game is difficult. Someone who, when things get chaotic, slows it down, finds the angle, moves the ball with intent and composure. And the question is, can Zubimendi do that at this level, in these moments? Because if I'm being honest with myself, as an Arsenal fan, I'm not sure I've seen it yet. And that's terrifying, because we have 5 games left. Let me take you into the Newcastle match specifically, because the stats are quite revealing. Newcastle had more possession, more shots, and in a game where Arsenal was supposed to be the team that wants the ball, wants to control, they were actually the team reacting. They were being asked questions rather than asking them. Now, you can't just put that at Zubimendi's door entirely. Football doesn't work like that. Defending starts from the front. But the midfielder who's supposed to control the tempo, who's supposed to be the pivot, the organizer, the one who dictates where the ball goes and when, he has a direct influence on that. And Neville specifically mentioned a counter-attack, a moment where Arsenal broke, where they had a chance to really hurt Newcastle, and the quality wasn't there. And he pointed at the midfield, at the lack of presence in those key moments. Here's what I think is the deeper tactical issue. And I want to explain this carefully, because I think this is actually the most important part of this whole discussion. Arsenal's midfield 3 is Rice, Zubimendi, and Odegaard. And on paper, genuinely, that looks elite. You've got Rice, who covers ground relentlessly, wins duels, carries the ball forward with incredible athleticism. You've got Odegaard, who operates in the half spaces, receives between the lines, creates chances. He's a top 5 player in this league, no question. But what does that leave for Zubimendi? What is his specific job in this setup? He's supposed to be the anchor, the one who sits, who controls the space, who recycles possession, who protects the defense when Rice goes forward, and crucially, who slows the game down when Arsenal are under pressure, when the intensity rises, when the opposition starts pressing, when things get chaotic. His job is to be the calm in the middle of it. The player who always has the answer, always has a pass, always knows what comes next. The problem is, when I watch Arsenal under pressure, that calm isn't always there. And I don't think that's entirely Rice's fault. Rice is doing exactly what he was asked to do. I don't think it's Odegaard's fault. He's playing further forward. The player in that specific role, the controller, the organizer, is Zubimendi. And the controller hasn't been controlling. Now, here's where I want to challenge myself, because I think there's a version of this argument that lets Arteta off the hook too easily. Is it possible that the system itself is the problem? That the way Arteta sets up this midfield, the responsibilities, the positioning, the demands, actually makes it harder for Zubimendi to do what he does best? Because here's what I know about Zubimendi from Real Sociedad. He was elite in a team that was built around him, a team that played through him, where the whole structure made it easy for him to be the conductor. He had the ball constantly. The team trusted him. The system was designed to let him dictate. Is that what Arsenal's system does? Or is Arsenal's system actually, when you look at it, more about intensity and athleticism and press and counter-press? And Zubimendi is being asked to be something slightly different to what he naturally is. I don't have a definitive answer. I genuinely don't. But it's a question worth asking, because if the answer is that the system is limiting him, then the problem isn't Zubimendi. The problem is a mismatch. And that's actually a bigger problem for Arsenal, because you can't fix a system mismatch in 5 games and a Champions League semi-final. But if the answer is, no, the system is fine, he just needs to impose himself more, then it's on him. And he's running out of time. Let me say something that might make some people uncomfortable. I think this Arsenal midfield, Rice, Zubimendi, Ødegaard, might be the most overhyped midfield trio Arsenal have put together in recent years. And I say that as someone who genuinely loves this squad, who believes in Arteta, who has watched every game this season. But think about it. On paper, it looks extraordinary. Rice is one of the best in his position in Europe. Ødegaard has been a Ballon d'Or candidate-level player. Zubimendi was supposedly the missing piece, the Rodri type that completed the puzzle. And yet, when you watch Arsenal in games where they need to control, not attack, not press, but genuinely control the tempo of a match, they don't always look like a team with an elite midfield. They look like a team that's fighting, competing hard, winning on effort and individual quality, but not always controlling, not always imposing. And that is specifically the function of the number 6, the anchor, the controller, and that's Zubimendi. I'm not saying he's a bad player. I want to be really clear about that. But I think there's a gap between what we expected and what we've got. And Neville, who watches football at the highest level every week, saw that gap. And he named it publicly. Right, so let's talk about what comes next. Because this isn't just an analysis exercise. There are real consequences here. 5 games remaining in the Premier League. Fulham at home, West Ham away, Burnley at home, Crystal Palace away. And sandwiched in the middle of all of that, Atletico Madrid, Champions League semi-final, first leg. Now, Fulham is the next one. And I think people are slightly underestimating Fulham right now. They're a well-organized side under Marco Silva. They press with energy. They're not going to let Arsenal play easily. And if Zubimendi can't control that game, if Arsenal again end up looking reactive, the conversation gets louder. But Atletico, let me talk about Atletico, because this is where I get genuinely nervous. Diego Simeone's teams are built on exactly one thing: making you uncomfortable. High press, defensive organization, physical intensity, disrupting your rhythm. And the player whose job it is to protect Arsenal from that, whose job it is to absorb that pressure, slow the game down, find the pass under intense pressure, is Zubimendi. This is the environment that will define him. Either he steps into it and delivers, and Neville has to come back on his podcast and say he was wrong, or he struggles again. And if he struggles against Atletico, then this becomes a summer transfer story. Because Arsenal cannot go into next season's Champions League campaign with a £55 million midfielder who can't control big European nights. Best case scenario, and I genuinely believe this is possible, Atletico is the making of Zubimendi. Big players often need one defining moment, one performance where everything clicks and you see what they're actually capable of. Maybe this is it. Maybe the pressure of a Champions League semi-final brings out the best in him. Worst case, and I don't want to say this, but I have to, he fades again. Arsenal survive on grit and Saka's quality and some Rice brilliance. And we come out of this summer wondering whether the Zubimendi signing was actually a mistake. And you know what the scariest part of that is? If we finish the season without the title, if City come back and take it on goal difference or on games in hand, and we look back at the moments where points were dropped, the Bournemouth game, the City game, and we ask why, part of the answer might be that our midfield didn't have a controlling presence when we needed it most. I'm not saying that lightly. Okay, one more thing before I wrap up. And this is the thing that I think is the most important and the least talked about. Declan Rice has played almost the exact same number of minutes as Zubimendi this season. And Rice has been absolutely extraordinary. Physical, dynamic, vocal, decisive. He's scored in big moments. He's recovered situations that looked lost. If you had to point at the Arsenal player who has performed most like a title-winning midfielder this season, it's Rice. Not Ødegaard, who's been brilliant but slightly below his absolute best. Not Zubimendi. Rice. Now, Rice is not a controller. He's not the type of midfielder whose job it is to slow things down. He's energy, dynamism, aggression. That's his game, and he's exceptional at it. But what that means is Arsenal actually don't have a controller. They have Rice doing one thing brilliantly. They have Ødegaard doing another thing brilliantly. And they have Zubimendi in between, trying to be the thread that holds it together. And in the games where Arsenal have looked uncertain, where they've looked like they might wobble, that thread hasn't always held. And here's the version of this that really bothers me as an Arsenal fan. We signed Zubimendi specifically because we needed that thread. We watched City for years, and we understood City had Rodri. And Rodri was the reason their midfield looked like it was operating on a different level. And we decided we need our version. So we went and got Zubimendi. £55.8 million. The most technically gifted anchor midfielder available. And now, 5 games from the end of the season, with the title in our hands, Gary Neville, a man who has watched more top-level football than almost anyone alive, is sitting on his podcast saying he's disappointed, that he expected more, that this isn't the player he thought Arsenal were getting. And the worst part? A part of me agrees with him. So where does that leave us? I think Zubimendi is not the reason Arsenal will lose the title, but I think he might be the reason they win it, because if he delivers, if the next 5 or 6 games see a version of Zubimendi we haven't seen consistently yet, a version that controls, that dictates, that slows things down when it matters, then Arsenal go over the line. But if we get the Zubimendi of the Newcastle game, technically fine, positionally okay, but not decisive, not authoritative, not the controller we need, then we're going to be relying on Rice and Saka and Ødegaard to carry us. And they might, they're good enough, but it shouldn't be that hard. The truth is, Zubimendi might be a genuinely great player, but right now, in this system, in these moments, I'm not sure he's the player Arsenal need him to be. And that is both completely unfair on him and completely true at the same time. He has 5 Premier League games and a Champions League semi-final to change that narrative. I hope he does. I really genuinely hope he does. Because Arsenal haven't won this league since 2004, 21 years. And for the first time in a long time, the squad is good enough. The manager is good enough. The belief is there. All we need is for the right players to stand up in the right moments. Zubimendi, this is your moment. Show us you're ready for it. Right, I want to know what you think. Honest answer in the comments. Do you trust Zubimendi in a Champions League semi-final against Atletico Madrid? Yes or no? Simple as that. Because I have a feeling the comments on this one are going to be very divided, and I want to read all of them. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. I cover Arsenal properly, not reactively, not just highlights and hot takes, actually thinking through what's happening and what it means. That's what we do here. I'll see you for the Atletico preview. That video is going to be interesting. Let's go Arsenal.